at the top of Ayin Gimel Amid Aleph at the Mishnah, and we're talking today about the din of a rodef, which is anyone who is trying to commit a most heinous act. Classic example is murder, but we'll see it extends to other heinous acts where there's a victim involved. You're allowed to use lethal force in order to prevent that person from committing that aveira. Ve'eluhin shematzilin osan benafshan. The following people, or the following situations, you can prevent a person from doing the heinous act by using lethal force, by taking their soul, literally. The cases are harodef achar chaver lohorgo, va'achar hazachar, va'achar hana'ara hame'orasa. 3 examples, as we'll see their examples, the list is longer. If a person is pursuing someone to kill them, that's literally a rodef. The second example is if a person wants to rape, one man wishes to rape another man, so that also is heinous because he's victimizing the other person. And the third example is if she's a nara hame'orasa, she's betrothed, so she's going to be defiled and shamed terribly through this act. And all of those 3, they rise to the level where you can use lethal force to prevent the perpetrator. Aval harodef achar behema v'hamachalal es hashabis v'ha'obed avodas kochav v'mein matzilon osan benavshan. But here are 3 examples where you cannot exercise lethal force to prevent someone from doing something truly heinous. And in these 3 cases, you'll note that there's no victim involved. At least there's no human victim involved. One is if a man is trying to commit an act of bestiality. Another is if he's trying to be Machalal Shabbos. And then the third is if he's trying to be Ovid Avodah Zarah. In these 3 examples, the act is no less heinous, but there's no victim. There's no one that's being defiled as a result of this act, and therefore you cannot use lethal force. Now we have to look at the Gemara and see where this is all derived from. So Tana Rabbanan, Minayin l'rodef achar chaveru lahargo shenitin lahatzilo benavsho. From where do we see that if someone is trying to kill another person, you can stop them with lethal force? Talmuloymar lo samrul dam reyecha. The answer is because the Torah says you may not stand idly by while your brother's blood is being spilled. So that tells me that you can stop a rodef with lethal force. But the Gemara says, but wait a minute. But maybe not. Maybe, we use that pasuk to save another person's life, but not necessarily to exercise lethal force to a rodef. As the Brisa says, Minayin l'roes chaver shu toveya b'nahar ochaya gorarasa olistin boin olav shu chayiv lahatzilo tamalomer lo samadol dam reyecha. These are examples of where you have an obligation to save someone's life because that person is in mortal danger. The 3 examples are a person's drowning, or a wild animal is dragging that person off to bring it into its hole, or robbers are coming to attack that person. But these examples don't address the ability to use lethal force to the perpetrator, only to do whatever you can to save the victim's life. So how do you know that you can use? So you see, we're using the pasuk for something else. So the Gemara says, "Enachinami ve'elanitan lahatzilo b'nafshu minon." So you're right. The Gemara says that's not the pasuk. We need to come up with another pasuk. So asya b'kal v'chomer mina'ara ha'me'orasa. Ma na'ara ha'me'orasa shelo ba ela lepogma. Amar Torah nitan lahatzilo b'nafshu rodef achar chaver lahargo lachas kama v'kama. Gemara says make a kal v'chomer. As we'll see shortly, the Torah allows you to kill a rapist who's trying to rape a na'ara ha'ma'orasa, and there the victim is not being killed, only being defiled. So kal v'chomer, when the victim is being killed, you can stop them with lethal force. The chiyonshin min adin. So the Gemara says, but wait a minute. We know general klal, a shas principle is that you cannot devise a punishment for a crime using a kal v'chomer. The Torah has to specifically state for that particular crime what the penalty is. The kal v'chomer can't be applied. It's not one of the principles of hermeneutics in Shas. So the Gemara says, you're right. Devei Rabbi Tana hekeshahu. So the answer is, you're right. It's not a kal v'chomer that we're making to connect murder to rape, but rather it is the psukim themselves, the verbiage of the psukim connect them to each other. It says, Ki kasher yakum ishal re'ehu urtzacho nefesh. Because the Torah says that it's not the betrothed girl's fault that she's being raped. Just like someone commits murder, it's not the victim's fault, so too it's not her fault. So why does the Torah compare a case of rape to a case of murder. Why does the Torah have to make that analogy? From here we can say that the Torah is analogizing rape to murder, but we can also apply the laws of rape to the laws of murder as well and act reciprocally. Makish rotzeach lenara ha'ma'orasa. Ha'nara ha'ma'orasa nitan la'atzilo b'nafsho. Af rotzeach nitan la'atzilo b'nafsho. And it's to teach me about murder. That just like in a case of attempted rape, you can stop the perpetrator with lethal force, so too you can do the same with an attempted murderer. Venara me'orasa gufa minolan. Okay, so Taka, tell me, where do you see from the psukim by Nara me'orasa that you can use lethal force? Kidatana devei Rabbi Yishmael, the Tana devei Rabbi Yishmael, ve'ein moshiala, hayesh moshiala b'chol davar she'achol hoshia. Because the Torah says that the reason why the girl is blameless is that she was raped in the field, she cried out, and there was no one to save her. Which implies that if there was someone to save her, he could use whatever means at his disposal to stop the rape from taking place, including lethal force. And that's how we know that you can stop a rapist with lethal force. So gufa. Minayin, let's go back to Lo Samad al Dam Reach. Minayin l'roes chaver shu tovea benaro chaya gorarasa o listin boin alav shu chayiv lahatzilo. From where do we know that if you see a person drowning or him being dragged off by a wild animal or being attacked by bandits that you're obligated to try and save his life? Tamulomar Lo Samad al Dam Reach. That's the pasuk. Well, wait a minute. But why? I have two psukim that seemingly tell me the same thing, because we learned from in another brisa that the verbiage by hashavas aveda, by returning lost items, has extra verbiage. The words v'hashevosolo, you shall return it to him, is completely superfluous to teach me that not only do I have an obligation to return a person's lost items, but if a person is about to lose his body because he's about to be killed, I have an obligation to save his life. So why do I need the pasuk of Lo Samad al Dam Reacha? So Imei Hasam Hava Mina Hani Mili Benafshi Aval Mitrach Omegar Aguri Yemalo Kamash Malon. Answers the Gemara, because if I only had one pasuk of Ahashevosolo, I might think that I only have to use physical exertion of my own person to run over, to pull him out of the water or whatever, but that I don't have to do anything more than that. Let's say I see a person about to be killed by bandits, and I have the opportunity not to use physical force, but I can negotiate with them and pay them off. Maybe there's no obligation. So therefore you need a second pasuk to tell me that no, even if it means expending your resources in order to save that person's life, you're obligated to do so. Okay, Tanu Rabbanan. Now let's go to the Brisa. Echad arodef achar chaver lo hargo. Ve'achar hazachar, ve'achar nara ha'ma'orasa, ve'achar chayvi misos beis, and ve'achar chayvi krisus matzilon asan benafsha. So the Brisa expands on our Mishnah. Our Mishnah had only given 3 examples of times when you can use lethal force to stop a rodef: murder, homosexual rape, and rape of a nara ha'ma'orasa. But the Brisa adds to that list of 3, and it says, in addition to that, anytime a person is trying to rape a woman who is an erva to him, that where the chiyuv, the penalty for that relationship would be either death or kares, you're allowed to use lethal force to stop that person. So, for example, if a brother is trying to rape his sister, there's an isser kares there, you can exercise lethal force over there also. So, but almana lekoin gadol gusha v'chalutz lekoin hedjod ein matzilun osan benafsha. But if it's less than a chiyuv kares, let's say an almana is being pursued by a kohen gadol, so there's only an isser lav. It's not an isser kares, and therefore you would not be allowed to exercise lethal force to stop the kohen gadol from raping the almana. You got to try and stop him, but you can't kill him in order to prevent it. Now, nevda ba'avera in matzilon asa benafsha. Now, furthermore, when we get to even the chiyuv kares or the chiyuv misa, if this woman has already been defiled in the past, such that the humiliation does not rise to a high level because she's already got the stigma of having been raped already by someone who's puzzled to her, so then you also cannot exercise lethal force. Yesh la moshia, ein matzilin osa benafsha. And then another issue is that if there's another way to save that woman without killing, the pursuer, then you have to use that other method if there's another way to save her. And then we finally in the Brisa it says Rabbi Yehuda Omer Af Omer Hanichu Lo Shelo Yahargena. Rabbi Yehuda says I have another exception to the rule. If a woman says she sees a guy trying to rape her, and she sees another guy trying to stop the rapist, but she says to the hero, she says, don't interfere, because if you try to interfere, he may kill me, then in that situation, you're not allowed to exercise lethal force, which is surprising. But let's see, Gemara will explain this shortly. So let's now unpack this brisa. So where do we know that you can use lethal force against any rodef who is trying to commit a sexual crime that has misa or kares? So Amar Kra v'lanara lo sase davar, ein lanara chet maves. Because this whole pasuk is, we're going to use every single word in this pasuk to derive the halacha. The Torah says, v'lanara lo sase davar, do not do anything to the na'ara who has been raped. She's not guilty. Ein lana'ara chet maves. The na'ara does not have the judgment of death or the sin of death upon her. Now notice that the two times that the word vilanara is written in that pasuk, Mendel, what's unusual about it? No, there's no hey. Right? It's read as vilanar. I thought you'd know that like, boom, right? So nar zeh zachor. So first of all, so the first time it says na'ar, where it's na'ara, where it's spelled na'ar, that tells me that homosexual rape is included in this din that you can use lethal force. Because remember, this whole context of na'ara morasa, we learned that that's the source that you can use lethal force to stop a rodef, right? So na'ar zezach. Na'ara, the second time it says na'ara, we read it normally, and therefore zunara morasa. This refers to the context, which is the na'ara morasa. And chet elu chayve krisus. Maves elu chayve misas based. The word chet in the pasuk means that there has to be a sin that rises to kares, and maves means there has to be a sin that rises to the death penalty. So either one, in those cases also, if it's a chayve krisus or chayve misas based in, so you can also use lethal force. So kol hani lamali. So now the Gemara says, why do you need to say all of those cases? Homosexual rape, rape of an ara hamorasa, rape of chayve krisus, and rape of chayve misas based in. I'll tell you why. Tzrichi di'ikas of rachmana na'ar mishum delav urche aval na'ara du urche imalo. Maybe I would have thought like this: if the Torah would have only addressed homosexual rape, maybe only there can you use lethal force because he's victimizing someone in such an abnormal way that it rises to a very high level of criminality, and you can use lethal force. But a nara hama-orasa, where he's having relations with her in a normative way, maybe it doesn't rise to that criminality, and therefore it needs to write nara. Because of Rachmana nara mishum tekapagimla, aval nara na'ar delo kapagimle imalo. And if the Torah would have only prohibited or told you use lethal force by a nara hama-orasa, I might have thought that homosexual rape does not rise to that level, because after all, you're not defiling the man, he's the same person. When you defile a nara marasa, you've deflowered her, you've disgraced her, and therefore maybe that's the reason you can use lethal force. But a man who's raped is not defiled physically in any way, so therefore maybe it wouldn't. So therefore it had to say nar. V'ikas of rachmana hani mishum dahaylav urchehi hu v'haka pagimla. Aval sha'ar arayas to urchayu v'lanafish bigmayo imalo kasav rachmana chet. And if I only had those two, na'ar and na'ara, I might have thought that it's only when they rise to a high level of criminality, either because it's abnormal, like homosexual rape, or you're defiling her by the case of Naira Morasa. But let's say you have a non-virgin erva, right? So she's not being physically defiled, because she's already not a virgin, right? So in that case, you might have thought, so what if there's an Isser Kares? She's not being defiled. And therefore the Torah has to say the word chet. V'ikas of Rachmana chet havamina filu chayvelavin kas of Rachmana maves. And if I would have only had the word chet without the word maves, I might have thought that any forbidden relationship, even a Kohen Gadol to an Almana, you could use lethal force. The Torah says maves, no, it has to rise to a high level. V'ikas of Rachmana maves, Hava mina chayve misos based in chayve krisos lo kosov rachmana chet. And if the Torah would have only said maves, I would have thought that only if it rises to an arayas where the penalty is death. But a chayve krisos, like a brother and a sister, maybe you can't use lethal force, and therefore the Torah had to write both chet and maves. So frek the Gemara v'lichtov rachmana chet maves v'lo boi nara v'nara. But wait a minute, just write chet and maves to teach me that for any chayve krisos or any mises based in, you can use lethal force to the rodef. And then that would be included in that, of course, would be a case of homosexual rape and a rape of an aram or rasa. So the Gemara says, you know what? That's a good argument. In achinami, ve'ela na'ar na'ara chad lemeute oved avodas kol chavim v'chad lemeute behema b'Shabbos. So the Gemara says you have to say that the words na'ar and na'ara are coming to be exclusive, not inclusive. What are they excluding? They're telling you that one word is coming, like the word na'ar, which tells me that a non-normative sexual act is you can use lethal force, but to the exclusion of a certain kind of non-normative sexual act which doesn't involve a human victim. And what is that? An animal. And the word na'ara is coming to exclude behema, it's coming to exclude avodah zarah. It's coming to exclude idolatry. Meaning that you need one to exclude, you cannot use lethal force by bestiality rape, and you cannot use lethal force when a person is running to worship avodah zarah. That's what those words are coming to exclude. Rashi says the word Shabbos really doesn't belong here. It's kedei naspa, because it appears in our Mishnah. But one second, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai da Amar Oved avodas kol chavim nitan lahatzilu b'nafsho lamali. But wait a minute. That's all well and good if you subscribe to our Mishnah. But we have a dissenting Tana, Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai. He says that you can use lethal force when you see a person running to worship avodah zarah. So according to him, you've got one extra word in the pasuk. What's it used for? Chad lemeute behema v'chad lemeute Shabbos. So the answer is one word na'ar is coming to exclude that a behema, for when you're raping a behema, you cannot use lethal force. And na'ara is coming to exclude Shabbos, because only when there's a victim do you get to use lethal force, but not when a person is mechalal Shabbos. Because I would have thought to say that since the Torah uses the same verb for avodah zarah of chilel as the word chilel by Shabbos, that if, according to Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, you can use lethal force for avodah zarah, you could also use lethal force for chilul Shabbos, kamash malon, that you cannot. Ula Rabbi Elazar, but Rabbi Shimon Domer Mechalal Esa Shabbos Nitan Latzil Benafsho Dasu Shabbos Mechilul Chilul Me'avodas Kol Chavim Ma'ikal Meimar. But wait a minute, Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai's son takes it one step further. Rabbi Elazar bar Rabbi Shimon says that I hold that you do connect Shabbos to Avodah Zarah, and I agree with my father that you can use lethal force when someone's running to worship Avodah Zarah, and you can use lethal force when someone is running to be Machalal Shabbos. So if that's the case, then what is that extra na'ar coming, or na'ara coming to exclude? So chad miut lemeute behema, v'idach adi de kasav rachmana na'ar kasav nami na'ara. So the Gemara's answer is the word na'ar is coming to exclude an abnormal sexual act for which you cannot use lethal force. Only for a na'ar, for homosexuality, can you use lethal force, but not for bestiality. And then the second word, na'ara, really is not coming to teach me anything, but since we want to go back and make sure that you know that we're talking about the topic of the pasuk is na'ara ha'ma'orasa, it mentions it as well in the pasuk. That seems to be the way that Rashi's learning. I'm embellishing Rashi just a little bit, but I think that's the way Rashi's learning. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Afa Omeres Hanichuli Shalo Yahargenim. Let's go back to the Brisa, where Rabbi Yehuda came up with another exception to the rule of using lethal force, where the victim, the woman, says, listen, don't stop the rapist, because if you try to stop him, he's going to kill me. In that situation, you cannot use lethal force to stop the perpetrator. B'mai kamiflagi. So the question is, why did the Rabbanan argue with Rabbi Yehuda? And why does Rabbi Yehuda say, let's say I have a gun, and I know very well that I can stop this guy without any harm coming to the woman. Just because she says, let him do it, because I'm scared. She's scared. that means that I don't use lethal force. So what's Rabbi Yehuda's svar and what's the Chachamim's svar? So Amar Rava b'makpedes al pigma manichasa shelo yahargena. Rabbanan savri apigma kapid rachmana vari makpedes al pigma. V'Rabbi Yehuda hayde kama rachmana katli mishum demasra nafsha liktala. Halomasra nafsha liktala. And period. So the argument is like this. The Chachamim hold that a woman does not want to be defiled. And any time a woman is going to be defiled by rape, you can exercise lethal force regardless of her expressions of her own safety. But Rabbi Yehuda says it's not only that the Torah says you can use lethal force because she's going to be defiled, but also you have to combine that with another factor, which is she's prepared to give up her life in order to not be defiled, right? But if a woman clearly expresses that she's not willing to give up her life, if it's a choice between rape and death, I'll choose rape, so then it no longer rises to a capital offense what this guy is doing. And therefore you're not allowed to use lethal force anymore. So that's the difference. The Chachamim say it's purely based on defilement, regardless of her willingness to submit herself to death. And the Rabbi Yehuda says, no, the reason you can use lethal force is because she's ready to die to prevent this act. So he's mamish arodef, ready to take her life. But if she says, I don't want to die, so then you no longer have that dispensation. So Amar le Rav Papa le Abaya almana le Kohen Gadol nami kapagimla. So according to the Chachamim, Rav Papa asked the question, if it's purely based on defilement, according to the Chachamim, so then I have a question. Why, when a Kohen Gadol is trying to rape an almana, can I not use lethal force? He's defiling her there as well. And if the sole criterion is defilement, so then why can't you stop by using lethal force? So Amar le apigma rabba kapid rachmana, apigma zuto lo kapid rachmana. The answer is that defilement has to rise to a certain threshold of defilement. When a man who is an erva to this woman rapes her, she becomes a zona. She becomes stigmatized. If she were to be impregnated by that rapist, the child would be a mamzer. So there's a high level of stigmatization that's attached to her as a result of this act of rape. When a woman is raped by a Kohen Gadol, let's say to an almana, she becomes a chalala. She doesn't become a zona. So her stigma does not rise to that level, and therefore you cannot use lethal force. So chet elu chayve krisus. Now let's go back to the brisa, which said that anytime there's a chayve krisus, you're allowed to use lethal force. So let's say the example we gave is a brother's trying to rape a sister, so then you can use lethal force. So let's raise a contradiction. Ve'ilu naros sheish lehen knas habo alachoso, that there's a law of rape in the Torah. The Torah says that if a man rapes a woman, he has to pay 50 shekels to the girl's father when she's a girl, right, in the age of 12. So the brisa just clarifies that even though, and the Torah says that assuming they're willing, he has to marry her in order to prevent her from being shamed in society. He has to protect her through marriage. But let's say she's not marriageable to him. So, for example, a brother rapes his sister. So the brisa clarifies that even though he cannot carry out the marriage afterwards, he still has to pay the 50 silver shekels. Okay? The question, of course, that's implicit in this is that if it's taka, a capital offense that this guy is doing to the point where I can use lethal force against him, that means that what he's doing is a capital offense. So then we have this principle of kimle b'derabamine, that we never make a person be put to death and have to pay for the exact same crime. So he's committing an act of rape for which he deserves to be put to death. Then how can the brisa then say that he has to pay the silver shekels? That's the question that the Gemara asks. So Amrur Rabbanan Kamei Rav Chisda Mishas Ha'ara de Pagma Ifter Le Mikatala Mamona Le Mishalim Ad Gemar Bia. So the Gemara says, based on the Gemara's knowledge from other Gemaras, that Gemara says, listen, the only time that you're putter from tashlumin because you're committing a capital offense is when the capital offense and the financial offense are committed simultaneously. But if they're committed one after the other, then you could be put to death and be forced to pay. So what's the situation over here? The sexual act can be divided into a number of stages. There's the first connection of the two bodies, of the man's organ to the woman's organ, and then there's further insertion into her body. At the initial contact between his organ and her organ, that's what we call ha'ara'ah. And it's at that moment that he has defiled her and deserves to be put to death. When does he become chayiv for the 50 shekels? Only after he's committed an act which would deflower her, which means that there has to be an insertion. And that only then is he liable for the 50 shekels. So therefore, since they're not being committed at the same time, they're being committed in two different stages, he can be chayiv both misa and mama. The Gemara says, but wait a minute. Hanicha l'man da'amar ha'ara'ah zu neshika, ela l'man da'amar ha'ara'ah zu achnasas haTorah ma'ika l'meimar. But wait a minute. There's a machlokas is what the word ha'ara'ah means, which is at the time when he defiles her and deserves to be put to death. One man da'amar, it's just physical contact between his organ and her organ. But there's another man da'amar in another Gemara that says that it's after he makes an insertion of his atara, which is the head of his organ. Only then has he committed the act of defilement, which then is simultaneous to the act of deflowering her, which would make him liable for the 50 shekels. So again, it's kimle b'derabamine. So the Gemara says, Ela Amar Rav Chizda kagon shabo aleha shelo kedarka, l'chazar bo aleha kedarka. The answer is that there's two sexual acts involved over here. He commits the first sexual act to defile her, anally, so therefore her virginity is still intact. And then he commits the second act of rape, which is normative rape, frontal rape, and therefore at that point he's deflowered her. So for the first act of anal rape, he's liable for the death penalty. For the second act of frontal rape, he's liable for the payment. Rava Amar b'mani chaso shelo yahargena. V'Rebbe Yehudi. Rabbi says, I have a different answer. It could be that there's only one act of rape, but we're talking about a case where the woman says, don't interfere because I'm scared he's going to kill me. And according to Rabbi Yehuda, you cannot use lethal force. And that's why the Brisa says that the brother will have to pay the 50 shekels, because there's no death penalty. Rav Papa Amar b'mefata v'divrei Yaakov. Rav Papa says, I have another answer. The Brisa that says that a brother has to pay 50 shekels is not where he rapes her forcibly, but rather he seduces her. And in that situation, there's no death penalty. There's only a death penalty if he's mamish arodif, but if she's consensual, so then there's no death penalty. Abaya Amar biyachol lahasl be'echad me'evarav Rabbi Yonasan ben Shali. And Abaya says, I have another answer. You could stop the rapist, the brother rapist, you can stop him without using lethal force. Let's say you have a taser, and you can fire the taser at him without killing him. So in that situation, you're not allowed to kill him. He's not worthy of the death penalty, and therefore he can pay the 50 shekels. The Tanya, Rabbi Yonasan ben Shal Omer, Rodef Shahir Rodef Acher Chaver Lo Argo, V'Yachol Lahatzilo Be'echad Me'evor V'Lo Hitzil Neragalav. That if you can prevent a person from committing a capital offense of being a rodef, and you can prevent him from doing that murder or whatever other heinous act he's about to commit by only injuring him, but not murder, but not killing him, and you end up killing him instead. This is a big thing in the news today with the police in the United States, right? If you end up using excessive force and you kill him, you've committed an act of murder, and you yourself will be put to death. My time at Rabbi Yonasan ben Shol, what's his reasoning? Because the Torah, he learns it out from the Psukim. The case of the Torah is when two guys get into a fist fight, and there's a woman bystander who's pregnant. That's the case of the Torah. So one of the guys thinks he's going to hit his friend, and instead he hits the woman in the stomach and causes her to miscarry. So the language of the Torah is that if v'lo yihiyeh ason, if there's no lethal force that's exercised against the person that he had intended to strike, so then he has to pay for the financial loss of the fetus that he's miscarried. But if im yihiyeh ason, but if he exercised lethal force, then you have to be mason yev and osata nefesh tachas nefesh. The guy forfeits his life. Which teaches me that v'amar Abelazar b'mitzvah shebemisa akasav b'daber. The Torah is talking about the mitzvah to put this guy to death in the event that he's trying to use lethal force. That if there was no lethal force exercised, or if there's the way that the Gemara is is learning it is like Rashi says, "Dichsiv v'mason yev v'ilo miskavin laharog d'shogeg go'amay mikdol elalav shmamino b'miskavin ustam rotziach nitan latzil b'nafsho." The guy who's hitting his friend really is trying to kill him, and therefore the Torah says that if he kills him, you have to put him to death. So he's a rodef. Shai miskavin v'afilo achiksiv dim lo yiyasam shein kan chi of misa. But the Torah says, but if there's no liability of death because he didn't end up killing the guy, so then anoshe anesh. So then since he's not being put to death, he can be assessed for financial penalties. So basically the bottom line is that any time a person does not deserve to be put to death because he hasn't risen to the level of murder, right? So then you can assess him financial penalties. So Iyamart Bishlama Yochal Latzil Be'echad Me'avav L'nitan Latzil B'nafsha and the Mishkachas La D'Yayanesh. So at what point does a person not deserve to be put to death for attempting murder? The answer is that it must be that you can stop him without killing him. You can disable him by injuring him without killing him. And therefore he can be assessed liability if he causes the fetus to miscarry. But if you're going to say that even if I can stop the rodef by just disabling him, but he still deserves the death penalty, then there would never be a case where if a person is attempting murder and he causes a fetus to miscarry, that he should ever be assessed for financial penalty. Because once he's under the rubric of death penalty, there should never be a liability of payment. So you see from this whole parsha that even when a person is attempting murder, he can be held liable to pay. Why? Because he can be stopped without lethal force, and therefore he's not a ben misa. He's not subject to the death penalty, and therefore we can assess him for payment. This proves our point, that when a brother is attempting to rape his sister, he'll have to pay the 50 shekels because he's not, if he does rape her, because he's not a ben misa, because he could have been stopped using something other than lethal force. So we're going to hold it here for today. We'll continue. We're in the middle of the back and forth. We'll continue the Shakla B'Tari Mirza Shem tomorrow. Anyone saying Kaddish?